Hey everyone, I'm Madonna Guy and this is the Natural Alternative Podcast. Welcome. I am so delighted to have James Roguski back on the program today. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm going to do something that I think most people should do. As we are recording this, it's May 7th of 2024. At least here in the United States, I think it's already May 8th for you.
It is.
But I think that's important because, a lot of people talk about mis, dis, and mal information. Well, there's also a new one. It's called old information. And so
True.
when things are changing really quickly, I've seen people play videos that are ancient and people start to think, oh my God, look what just happened. So, you know, everything is time sensitive and things are changing very, very, very quickly. So thank you for having me. And where do you want to start?
Absolutely. Yeah, on Saturday here in Australia, across all our major cities, we had some rallies. They weren't huge like they were during the last 4 years, but nonetheless,
Mhm.
it was good to see people, and digital ID and the international health regulations were two of the things on the agenda chatting about, because everything's connected, as we know.
Well, I don't think the powers that be, expected as many people to be paying attention as there are. And, the simple fact that anybody is talking about the international health regulations or, the quote unquote pandemic treaty, they would have loved to have just quietly done all of this in their secret little meetings. But, we're watching them like a hawk, and that's very encouraging.
Yes, absolutely. And last time we were chatting, which I think was January,
Mhm.
there was, and now we're in the middle of meetings all over the place, aren't we? So
Mhm.
lots is going on. And so where is everything at the moment? What's been won? What's been, still hammered away in the background?
It's we used to play a game of cards when I was a kid. You take the deck of cards and throw it up in the air and call it 52 pickup, right? It's a mess. It's all over the place.
uh,
And so uh let me break it down to at least two. You know what? I'm gonna do three separate things. Okay.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna start with the thing that bugs me the most, which is in 2022, the World Health Assembly pretended that they adopted amendments to five articles of the international health regulations. Small little problem. They never bothered to vote. They just created a document and said that they adopted them, and they never voted. And 18 months after that, which would have been November 28th, 2023, Rob Roos, who's a member of the European Parliament, and 11 other members of the EU Parliament, sent a letter to Tedros and said, hey, we see these amendments and can't find any evidence that you voted. And there's been silence from the WHO. And I noticed a couple of weeks ago that the videos that were from that assembly have magically disappeared from the WHO website.
Oh,
And so now, they didn't have anything on them because they never voted. So, it was just evidence that they did never do anything. And they published a document a couple of weeks ago saying that four nations rejected those amendments. So there are four nations who do not have to abide by what everybody is believing are these new rules. The Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Slovakia.
hmm.
Everybody else has less time, uh, half the time, for the next round of amendments to go into force. So I cannot believe that Rob Roos, who's a member of the European Parliament, came to the United States a couple of months ago, presented that information to Senator Ron Johnson. He had a meeting in Washington, D.C., and the entire room pretty much just went, whatever. It blows my mind. You've got international fraud that should be a scandal that should bring Tedros down, and it's astonishing. I can't get people to talk about it. It's
Yes.
amazing. So that's number one. But that's old news, right? So the new version of the amendments, um, they're way behind schedule. They're supposed to give 4 months advance notice. Well, that passed on January 27th,
Yeah.
2024. On this one, finally, people are speaking up and starting to say, hey, you guys missed your deadline. You should not even consider, you should not even be allowed to consider amending the regulations. And they still have not finished their negotiations. They told us in October that they were going to miss their January deadline to give us 4 months' notice. They had meetings in February, they had meetings in March, they had meetings in April. There's supposed to be a new version of the proposed amendments on Friday, the 10th. Don't hold your breath, but we'll see what happens. You know, they circulate it privately amongst the nations before they make it public, and it often leaks out. And they're going to have another meeting on May the 16th and the 17th. Maybe they'll reach an agreement, and maybe it'll be done, and maybe they'll give us a nanosecond to look at it before they want to try to approve it. We shall see. Now, in that document, the thing that is of concern to me is actually what's in the international health regulations for the last 19 years, since 2005. Article 31 is about isolation, quarantine, vaccination, prophylaxis, and medical examination of people who are traveling internationally.
Yes.
Article 31 clearly states that a nation can compel an international traveler to have a medical exam, undergo some sort of prophylaxis, vaccine, or be isolated and quarantined. Now, to me, that is an absolutely crystal clear violation of fundamental human rights. But if you want to travel outside of your home country and go anywhere, you have to realize that when you leave, wherever you may be, your rights and freedoms don't necessarily go with you. When you land in another nation, this international agreement, this is not the WHO telling nations that they have to do that to travelers. It's an agreement for the last 19 years that essentially, if one nation, is talking to the other nation, they say, well, you can abuse our people when they travel to your country, but we'll abuse your people when they travel here. And essentially what they would like to do is just stop people from traveling. And you have to be very compliant if you want to get around that. You have to have your papers. Well, here's the problem. The tests are bogus. They're not really tests. The PCR is not a test, and all the other tests. How do you even begin to test someone who how could anybody determine if another person is actually a danger to some other human being? That is really the core question. People are afraid of everything.
Yeah.
But how can you actually say that a person, a man, woman, or child, is a danger to another person? Well, if they recently got an mRNA jab, and if you understand the concept of shedding, it might be the other way around. It might be the person who just got a bunch of jabs could actually be the danger to everybody. Well, the tests are ridiculous, and the jabs don't work. I mean, they don't stop transmission, they don't stop infection or transmission, they don't do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Unless you believe that what they're supposed to do is actually, derange your immune system and cause disease, disability, and death. They're relatively good at that. And so this Article 31, they want to strengthen it. They want to make amendments to Articles 24 and 27 that would say that nations could implement isolation and quarantine as appropriate. In legal terminology, I think that's void for vagueness. It's just, what does appropriate mean? It means whatever somebody wants it to mean.
That's right.
And so there's many other things going on in the proposed amendments. We shall see if they come up with a new version on approximately May the 10th, but that's still to be finalized on May the 16th and the 17th. Never mind, the 4 month notice. We'll be lucky if we get 4 days. And so the May Assembly is on starting on the 27th, but these issues are scheduled for Tuesday, the 28th. And that leaves, last but not least, the proposed pandemic treaty slash agreement slash framework convention, whatever you want to call it. They're still busy negotiating this week as we speak. They're supposed to hope to be done by Friday the 10th. There's been rumblings that, maybe they're not going to make it. There was a rumor, probably reasonably substantiated, that over the past weekend, the delegates from the United States, the European Union, 4 African nations, South Africa, Botswana, Ethiopia, and Kenya, and a bunch of representatives from Big Pharma had a little powwow over the weekend. Don't know what they might have discussed, but we shall see if that has an impact on these last few days of negotiations. And, I think it's really important for people to understand that this proposed agreement is not what people have been saying it is. It's not an attack on national sovereignty. It's actually exactly the opposite. A lot of times people have said that they think the African nations will save us if they reject this treaty. But people don't realize that the relatively low-income nations of the world called for these negotiations. They want this treaty. They want to have a piece of the pie. They want to protect their sovereign rights over biological resources. It's right in Article 3, Section 1 under sovereignty. This is where everybody's just been given misinformation or old information. The purpose of the treaty slash agreement and all these negotiations is nations don't want to hand over the genetic information from whatever pathogen they may claim to find because it's worth a lot of money. And so when they handed that over to Pfizer and Moderna and they took and put it into the jabs and the boosters, they looked at that and they said, well, wait a minute, you just pirated our national resource and turned it into money and you didn't share. And they had a hard time getting the jabs, which they're lucky. But this is what these negotiations are really about. They want tons of money to go looking for pathogens because they're like the new gold mine. It's potentially more valuable to find a scary genetic sequence and claim it's a pathogen. It's the bird flu that's going to sicken a dolphin or a cow, and somebody might get pink eye, and you got to lock down the world. And the money that is potentially involved in this, they want to go looking for pathogens, bring them into a WHO coordinated laboratory network so that they can send it off to the central biohub with involved in the pathogen access and benefit sharing system. If they give access to the pathogens, the companies have to share the benefits. And then the WHO would be in charge of filling up their distribution hub and be in charge of distribution and logistics. And so what we're really looking at here, as far as I'm concerned, is an organized crime syndicate designed to profiteer off the next pandemic, not prevent it. Because if you're busy making all kinds of products and putting them in warehouses, you got to move that product. You got to have a need for it.
Yes.
And so finding and I've been watching the news today because there's a whole new game in town. They're talking about H5N1 bird flu. The bad acting that is on the news media right now is, quite entertaining, but I'm certain that they're, putting fear into the vast majority of people around the world just in time to get these treaties signed because, could be really dangerous out there if you're playing with birds that have been messing with cows and dolphins. Got to be careful.
Do you think people will really buy it this time? They will, won't they?
I looked into the British, I think it was the British Medical Journal, and I'm still trying to figure out, in that journal, they had a photograph. It was kind of, just someone's eyes. And the subheading under, or the caption under the photograph made me think that it was not the actual patient that they were referring to. This one farm worker who had conjunctivitis was better the next day, but the story got blown out of proportion. So it looked like it was some sort of stock photo. I haven't been able to determine, for certain, but the
Yes.
person's eyes were beyond bloodshot. I mean, it was like he had some sort of um, uh, his eyes were very, very red. And then that picture was put into things like the Mirror in the UK, or the New York Post, and the caption changed, and it said that, oh, that photograph was, the farm worker who had taken ill. And then people were making videos of it with graphics with, blood coming out of people's eyes. And you could just see the progression of how, somebody says something and it gets a little expanded, then it gets a little more expanded. And then, before you know it, we're all going to die.
Yes.
Okay. And pay attention, people, because the propaganda is coming hard and furious.
It is, absolutely. Now, I did hear a couple of days ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some in Congress, some people did actually stand up. I think it was Senator Ron Johnson who spearheaded something against the international
Senator
health
Ron Johnson
regulations.
and 48 other, for a total of 49 Republican senators, did write a letter to Biden saying that they felt that the amendments in the treaty should not be signed. I was a little disappointed with the letter. Number one, it did not mention the fraud from
Right,
2022. Um, and they said that they wanted to reform the WHO.
right.
And what we need to do is leave and abolish the WHO. So while it was good that they showed, Republican unity and pushed back against Biden, um, the issue is not, oh, we want the Senate to vote on this. We don't want this to go through at all,
Yeah,
because the the fundamental concept, the fundamental premise behind all of this is based on, well, if you're properly tested or properly jabbed, then you'll be able to move around.
yes,
Well, the jabs don't work and the tests are fraudulent. So why are they trying to negotiate billions of dollars to have geographically distributed manufacturing of these very things that don't work?
yes,
And so it's one of these things where you have to just kind of take a step back and go, this entire thing, the foundation of it is fraudulent.
yes.
How can you even truly determine whether any of this is actually happening when the tests are fraudulent?
Absolutely. Now, what do you ask people to do? You're still getting people to do their hashtag exit the WHO videos?
Absolutely. And all anybody really could, needs to do worldwide is go to exitthewho.org. That's, dozens of countries, people are speaking up, and as you've seen, we mentioned, 4 countries did reject the amendments from 2022, even though they were fraudulently, pretend adopted. And so job number one is to be informed. And, I think if you look at what's going on in the news media and around the world today, it's quite frankly astonishing how many people are aware of what the heck is going on with the WHO. Now, it changes almost every day. They're in the middle of these negotiations. And so, that's why I put the date at the beginning of this video.
Yes,
Tomorrow, something a little bit will change, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So, you kind of have to stay on top of it, because what has been happening for the last year is people have been talking about stuff that's been long gone for,
yes,
quite some time. And so there's supposed to be a new version of the amendments on May the 10th. We'll see if they let that out publicly. They're negotiating on the treaty until May the 10th. And if they will reveal, whatever they've decided at that point. But what they've said in one of their resolutions is that it doesn't look like they're going to actually finish the decision-making process. And so what they're going to maybe try to do is have nations sign an unfinished agreement and then set up 2 or 3 more working groups to negotiate for the next 2 years. So sign it now, and we'll let you know what it says in a couple of years.
Yeah.
You really just can't make this stuff up. If this was a Hollywood movie screenplay, the producers would be like, get out of here. That's ridiculous. Nobody's going to believe that. Who would be dumb enough to sign an agreement that you haven't finished negotiating yet? Well, maybe 194 member nations of the WHO.
Wouldn't surprise me. Australia will have their hand up quick smart. We just have no smarts about this whole thing, except for maybe half a dozen politicians, I reckon. But
Yep.
yes.
Well, I have continually voiced my faith in just, the average man and woman. Anybody who looks at this, they go, well, this is ridiculous. They want billions of dollars. They want wealthy nations to put billions of dollars into the way it seems like it's going to work out. They don't want to have just one big fund. They want to have all of these little different, what they call financial intermediary funds. Um, there's some organization that acts as an intermediary, right? Somebody donates a bunch of money, they decide who gets it. Sounds like money laundering to me.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they want to have all this money go into all these funds to build out the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex in relatively poor nations, as if the poorest nations in the world really need more genetic sequencing to go find more pathogens. There's so many more fundamental things that would improve people's health. Diverting billions of dollars into this high-end, high-tech laboratory equipment and mRNA manufacturing,
Yeah.
this is not how you help improve people's health. This is how you help increase the wealth of a small segment of the population that's going to receive all the contracts when they get doled out every year at the conference or the party meeting.
Yeah.
So, people can smell this. It stinks. And all we really need to do is let people, take a look at it.
Yes.
And you'll see that what they're trying to do is not an attack on national sovereignty. Okay. The travel restrictions, they make it so that each nation can abuse foreign travelers who are trying to travel in the proper way. That's actually a very perverse expression of national sovereignty. And with the pathogens,
Mm.
the nations who called for this agreement, they don't want their national biological resources to be pirated. So they want benefits in return. It's literally written in the definition of sovereignty. So they've got everybody barking up the wrong tree. Oh, the WHO is trying to take over the world. And no, they want to take over the business of
Yes.
pandemics. Okay. They don't care if your local tyrants force you to do things that you don't want to do. They don't need to teach your local government officials how to attempt to abuse your rights and freedoms. They figured that out all by themselves. And over the last 4.5 years, they didn't need any amendments or any treaty to overstep their authority and attempt to abuse people. So there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation. The local issues with your local government officials, or all the way down the thing to school boards and city councils and businesses and hospitals and all these things, that is still a local issue. You still have to work on all of that locally. The amendments are of big concern with international travel. And the treaty is a corrupt money deal that they're trying to steal from rich nations and hand it over to oligarchs in poor nations because they missed out on making money the first time around.
Yeah. Yeah. When you did mention the countries in Africa, I thought, well, they're not the best countries for looking after their people necessarily.
Well, the people, as a general rule around the world, I think are smarter than their leaders. And I
Yeah.
don't even like to call them leaders. They are supposed to be our public servants. But, they listen to a different something, whether it's their donors or their owners.
Yeah.
They certainly don't listen to the people.
No, not here in Australia either. Absolutely.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
No, fantastic. So the website is exitthewho.org. And where can people find you?
Exitthewho.org.
What's your Substack called again?
Well, the hard part is spelling my name, jamesroguski.substack.com, JAMESROGUSKI.substack.com. And everybody's welcome to give me a call or find me on Telegram or Signal or WhatsApp. I'm in California, and it's 310-619-3055.
Beautiful. Excellent. Thanks so much, James. Have a
Thank you
fabulous
so much.
day.